There are times when it seems like everything around us is falling apart. You try hard, you do everything you can, but still, the feeling of loneliness is overwhelming. And no matter how many people you are surrounded by, the pain you carry inside you is a weight that seems to be yours alone. Now, what if I told you that this feeling is not only common, but that it also carries an answer that few realize? The truth is that, even in the darkest moments, God is by our side, attentive to every detail of our lives. It is a statement that goes against what many believe, but this divine connection is what can transform even the most desperate situations. Throughout this video, you will understand why we are not alone and how this wisdom can bring hope and peace in times of crisis. In Psalm 77 it says, "I cry out to God that he may hear me. I cry out to God for help. In times of trouble I seek the Lord. I stretch out my hands without ceasing, for my soul is inconsolable. I remember you, O God, and I sigh. I begin to meditate, and my spirit fails me." When someone is in deep anguish, as the psalmist expresses in his prayer, the feeling of helplessness can be overwhelming. In such moments, all that remains is a desperate cry for help. How many times have we heard stories of people who, in the midst of life's chaos, found hope in a simple prayer? It is at these times that God seems to be the only source of refuge, and this constant search for an answer, even in silence, is a reflection of a faith that still fights, even when tired. The psalmist describes sleepless nights, unable to sleep, with an inconsolable soul. Many can identify with this scene. Perhaps it is anxiety that keeps you awake at night, or concern for a loved one, or even financial uncertainty. Prayer, in these moments, becomes a cry for help. And it is incredible to realize that even without an immediate solution, this simple act of trusting everything to God renews faith. Trust is like an anchor that keeps us stable, even when the sea is rough. What is important to remember here is that prayer does not need beautiful words or a magic formula. It is a sincere dialogue between a troubled heart and a God who listens. For those who are in this phase, a good exercise is to stop everything for a few minutes at night, reflect, and place everything in God's hands. Perhaps do as the psalmist did and simply cry out with your soul, extending your hands in trust, hoping that divine wisdom will bring the peace that seems so far away. There are times in life when emotional and spiritual fatigue is so great that even closing your eyes seems impossible. Your mind won't stop, your heart is tight, and a feeling of heaviness spreads throughout your body. The psalmist describes exactly this, a restlessness so deep that he couldn't even speak. Many people face this same difficulty when emotional pain becomes unbearable. They become so consumed by problems that even if they want to, they can't express their feelings. They just feel. This restlessness can come from many sources. It can be caused by problems at work, family issues, or even an existential crisis. Imagine someone who has responsibilities at home, at work, and still has to deal with their own internal dilemmas. The accumulation of all this can create a feeling of suffocation, of being overwhelmed. But even in these moments, there is hope. Faith, when cultivated, brings a confidence that calms the spirit, even when words fail. If you've ever been through this, you know how difficult it is to break out of the cycle. One practice that can help is to dedicate a few minutes of your day to meditating or reading something that strengthens your faith. Reading a psalm like Psalm 77 can serve as a reminder that you are not alone, and that God knows every restlessness in your heart. Having the wisdom to stop, breathe, and seek comfort in God's promises can transform that restlessness into peace. Human fragility is revealed in an intense way when we are faced with problems that seem greater than we can bear. The psalmist, in his prayer, shows us our impotence in the face of life. When everything falls apart, the strength we think we have quickly fades, and we become aware of our limitations. In these moments, the only solution is to cry out to something greater than ourselves. It is at this point that trust in God becomes the anchor that keeps the soul firm, even in the midst of a storm. How many times have we felt this way, incapable of solving the problems around us? Whether it is family issues, crises at work, or personal dilemmas, the feeling of helplessness is real. Wisdom lies in recognizing that, despite our fragility, there is a greater power to which we can turn. God, with his infinite wisdom, knows what is best for each of us. He understands what we do not yet see and acts at the right time. This gives us hope, even if we have no control over the situation. When fragility is present, the best action is to surrender. Leave in God's hands what we cannot resolve on our own. Often, trusting that He takes care of everything is what allows us to continue. A practical way to do this is to pray sincerely, without fear of exposing our weaknesses. And in addition, seek support in activities that nourish the soul, such as reading good books that address faith and trust in times of crisis, such as John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. The greatest joys and often the deepest pains come from our family life. The psalmist, when expressing his anguish, reflects a reality that many experience within their own homes. The family, although a source of love and hope, can also be the place where we face the most intense challenges. Conflicts, misunderstandings, and difficult situations can generate a feeling of helplessness. At these times, faith in God becomes essential because it is He who gives us wisdom to deal with these moments of crisis. Think of the times when a simple domestic argument caused a greater shock than expected, or when a problem with a child or spouse seemed overwhelming. The home, which should be a place of refuge, sometimes becomes a battlefield. But trust in God teaches us to seek solutions with wisdom and patience. A practical example is the search for dialogue, something so simple, but which can transform family dynamics. Prayer, both individually and together, can also be a powerful tool for reconciliation and healing. Facing family difficulties can seem exhausting, but it is precisely in these moments that faith is most tested and strengthened. God knows the dilemmas and pain experienced within the home and is able to restore even the most fragile relationships. For those seeking hope, it is important to remember that family ties can be renewed when placed before God. A valuable exercise is to set aside time to listen to and understand each family member, creating an environment of peace and trust, even in times of crisis. Even in moments when suffering seems unbearable, the psalmist reminds us that God is always attentive to our pain. No matter how much life sometimes makes us feel forgotten or alone, God never abandons us. He knows every tear, every thought, and even when answers seem distant, we can have confidence that He is in control. The hope that comes from knowing that God takes care of every detail of our lives is what keeps us strong, even in the most difficult times. How many times, in the midst of daily struggles, do we feel alone? It seems that no one realizes the depth of our suffering. But the psalm shows us that God not only notices, but is also deeply involved. He observes every step and at the right time, acts wisely. The patience to wait for God to act comes from faith in His promises. A practical exercise to strengthen this trust is to keep a journal of prayers and blessings. By writing down and rereading what God has already done, we are reminded of His faithfulness, which renews our hope. This divine attention also brings unparalleled comfort. Knowing that God is with us, even when human help seems to fail, gives us unshakable confidence. For those who are going through hardships, dedicating time each day to reflecting on God's promises can bring peace. Reading Bible passages that reinforce God's care, such as Psalm 23, for example, is a practical way to keep hope alive. This recognition that God is always watching prepares us to receive the miracles He promises. Beginning in verse 10, we see a significant shift in the psalmist's prayer. He begins to recall God's mighty deeds and meditate on the miracles of the past. This change in perspective is something we can all learn from. When difficulties seem insurmountable, looking back and remembering the victories God has already granted us can renew our faith. The psalmist teaches us that even though we do not understand God's timing or ways, He acts wisely and His power continues to work miracles. It is interesting to note that many of the miracles that happen in our lives begin with a change in attitude. When we look at the examples in the Bible, we see that God's great deeds always came in times of need, but also in times of trust. Whether it is healing illnesses, restoring relationships, or providing for times of scarcity, miracles are still possible. To apply this teaching, it is important to cultivate an attitude of active faith, trusting that God acts in His timing and that He can transform any situation. Keeping this expectation alive, even in difficult times, is essential for those who seek to see God at work. Just as the psalmist reflects on past miracles, each of us can do the same. A good exercise is to list the blessings and victories we have already experienced, no matter how small. This helps us to strengthen our confidence that the God who worked in the past continues to work today. And so, with a heart full of hope, we await the time when we will see new miracles in our lives. Now that you have absorbed all this knowledge, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to continue facing your challenges as before, or are you going to apply these truths and change your life? Think about it. God has shown countless times that He is present, attentive, and ready to act. What is stopping you from trusting Him completely? Maybe it is time to reflect on how you have faced your battles. Isn't it time to stop fighting alone and start handing your problems over to God? What have you done for your faith, for your family, for your hope? Leave a comment, share your experiences and challenges. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you will continue learning and strengthening your faith step by step. Let's go on this journey together.